Hello guys, welcome to my channel. In today's video, we are going to discuss about Azure Cosmos DB. We will go in Azure portal and create Azure Cosmos DB, and we'll see all the properties and how we can create the Cosmos DB. Okay, if you don't know what is Azure Cosmos DB, so this is a type of database, a NoSQL database, which we can create and use for our applications. That can be your web applications, mobile applications, or any type of applications. Okay, this is a advanced database which provides very low latency and high availability. Okay, this is very high responsive and its latency is very low. Okay, this is I have opened the Microsoft documentation. If you need more details, you can go and refer this documentation. You'll get everything here, all the things. And Azure Cosmos DB also provides so many APIs to select and create the database. So if I open this, you will see it provides so many APIs like API for NoSQL, API for MongoDB, PostgreSQL, Apache, Gremlin, Cassandra, and API for table. Okay, so these many types of databases you can create using Azure Cosmos DB. Now we will go to Azure portal and try to create a Cosmos DB. So simply go to Azure portal and search for the Cosmos DB. Open this service. Okay, here we don't have any database. We will have to create one. Just click on create Azure Cosmos DB account, or you can just click on this plus create button here. Once you click on this, you will get the API options to choose for your workload. Okay, you can select what type of database or what type of DB account you want to create. You'll get all the definitions here as well, along with the details. Like if you want to select Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL, so generally you want to create Azure Cosmos DB and you don't want any API, you just want to use a Cosmos DB, you just select this first one, Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL. Okay, so generally it will support all type of client libraries like .NET, JavaScript, Python, Java. Okay, and if you need any other things like you need PostgreSQL with Azure Cosmos DB, you can select this one. If you are using MongoDB, you are familiar with MongoDB, you can always use this Azure Cosmos DB for my MongoDB. Okay, if you are using Apache Cassandra, you can use this as well. Or if you have created your databases in table, eh, then you can select this as well. Okay, you can select Azure Cosmos DB for Apache Gremlin if you are using graph database or something like this. Okay, so let me create the first one, Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL. If you need more details of all these databases, you can always click on learn more and it will take you to the Microsoft documentation. Let me click on create. So here you have to provide subscription and resource group. If you don't have any resource group, you can create one. So I have created this, and here you will have to provide your Cosmos DB account name. So let me do that. Cosmos -db-01. Suppose this is my Cosmos DB account name, but this is not available. Let me try something else. Okay, so this is available now. You can see the tick mark here. It means it is available. If you want to configure availability zones, you can click on enable, and if you don't want it, you can disable it. Okay, If you enable it, you get an option to select the locations. You can select the location where you want to uh, I mean host this database. Okay, if you want to disable availability zone, you can always disable it. Okay, and here you can select the locations like already said. If you want, suppose this location should be nearest to you. Suppose you are in Europe or West US, then based on that you can select your locations. If you are in Australia, India, so suppose you are in India, in South India, you have to select the South India as location, so that your Cosmos data base account will be created in South India, and your latency will be very low, so that if you access your application uh, from internet, or if your user is accessing your application, they will be they will be able to access your application smoothly. Okay, and if you keep your location very far from your current location or current user base, your latency will be high. So make sure you are selecting this location based on your requirement. Okay, let me select the default one. Okay, you can select the capacity mode here, provision, throughput, or serverless. Okay, if you want serverless, then you can select that as well. And if you need more about capacity details, you can always click on that. It will take you to the Microsoft documentation. You can see here how to choose between provision, throughput, and serverless. You have this all the detailed comparison. You can select based on that, like what the maximum storage per container you get, what is the, like in geo distribution this will support, but this will not support. So if you need geo distribution, you can select provision, throughput. If you need maximum storage per container and all other things, you can select based on the comparison. Okay, so let me keep this as default. Okay, if you want apply free tier discount, you can apply. If you don't want, you can select do not apply, but let it be the apply. And you can always select this limit total account throughput to limit the total amount of throughput that can be provisioned for this your Cosmos DB account. Okay, let me click on next, which is global distribution. If you need geo redundancy, or if you want this Cosmos DB to be highly available, generally Microsoft provides 99.95% SLA. If you are not selecting the geo redundancy, that is also enough. I mean 99.95 is okay for any application which you are hosting. If your application is so critical that it needs more than that, then you can always select zero redundancy, so that it will be 99.999% of availability. Okay, this generally will make a replica of your Cosmos DB account into some other region as well. Okay, but for now we will disable it because we are just using this for demo purpose. You can select this multi-region rights as well. If you want to enable it, you can enable, or you can disable it. If you need more details, you can always click on this details tab of any property. Like this is multi-region rights capability, allows you to take advantage of the provision throughput for your databases and containers across the globe. Okay, the next most important thing is networking. Let me go there. So how we want to connect to your database? If you want to connect to your database through public, or anybody want, I mean you want anybody to connect to your database publicly, you can select all networks. But if you want your database to be connecting, to be working privately, you'll have to select either public endpoint or private endpoint. Okay, if you select public endpoint, this database will be accessible from the virtual network or some particular IP addresses which you allow it here. Okay, just select the public endpoint and it will, you can configure the settings here. Like if you allow your database to be accessed from Azure portal, then you can allow it or you can deny it. Let it be allowed at the moment. If you want your IP to be added here, you can click on allow or deny based on your requirement. Okay, so in public endpoint, generally you can configure your virtual network or some particular subnet so that resources from that subnet only can access this database. Okay, so suppose if you have a virtual machine and your application is hosted within that. Suppose you have a Sonar Cube that is hosted inside your virtual machine, and Sonar Cube wants to connect to this database or any other application. You can take an example that can be your any web application or anything. So that wants to connect to this database. That has to be hosted inside this virtual network and this subnet. Okay, then only it will be able to connect to your database. Okay, so this you will have to configure based on your requirement. This virtual network and subnet should be the location where your basically web server is present, so that they will be able to access this Cosmos DB account. Okay, you can select the transport layer security protocol here, which TLS version you want to use, TLS 1.0, 1.1 or 1.2. Okay, so let's use the latest version. Okay, now let's open the private endpoint. Select the private endpoint and check what we get here. So for this, generally in public endpoint, it will be accessible only from the selected networks and traffic will go publicly. Okay, traffic will be going publicly and it will be connecting with your IP or maybe your virtual network subnet. But if you select the private endpoint, the traffic will not go outside of your virtual network. It will connect privately. You will have to create private endpoints and with using that private endpoint, the Cosmos DB account will communicate with your virtual network resource using that private endpoint. Okay, so again you can configure something like this: allow access from Azure portal, allowed or deny. And if you want to allow public network access, you can allow it, but since you are creating private endpoint, you can always deny it. So once you have denied it, it will automatically disable all the settings like Azure portal or public access from my IP. Okay, so if you just disable it, your database will not be accessible from public. That can be accessible from your virtual network through this private endpoint. Again, of course, you will have to enable NSG rules to this private endpoint subnet so that your database or resources from your virtual network should be able to communicate with this database. Okay, now for private endpoint, you can click on add and configure the private endpoint. I have already uh, created a video on this private endpoint, like how we can set up the private endpoints. For this, generally you set up a private endpoint along with private DNS zone, and in private DNS zone your virtual network should be linked, and a DNS record should be added in that private DNS zone for your private endpoint. Okay, so the same set of things here also you'll have to do. You'll have to select the resource, private endpoint name, virtual network, and subnet for your private endpoint. Here you can integrate this with your private DNS zone, and you can pass your private DNS zone here so that it will create a DNS record in that. Using that DNS record, your resources will access this database privately from your virtual network. Okay, so this is done. Now let's move to backup policy. So here in backup policy, you can configure the backup, like how you want to backup this database. If you want to set some periods on what should be the interval, what should be the retention of backup, you can select this periodic. You can select the storage redundancy as well, like this should be geo redundant, locally redundant, or zone redundant. If you selecting geo redundant, it will be geo redundant. That means your database backup will be stored in a different region. Suppose you have created your database in east US, then your backup will be stored in west US. Okay, if you select locally redundant, that means it will be stored in same region and same zone as well. Okay, so this is not highly available. If you need highly available, you always should select geo redundant. And the third one is zone redundant. This will be stored in the same region but different zone. So if you are selecting zone redundant, uh, your database backup will be stored in different zone but in same region. Okay, so let it be the default, or you can select other policies as well, like continuous or continuous 30 days. You can select it based on your requirement. Okay, now let's move it to let it be periodic for now. Now let's click on encryption. So encryption, you can keep this as default service managed key. Next is tags. You should be always adding tags so that people from your organization or other teams, if they see the resource, they will be able to understand who has created this resource and what is the purpose, and even if they want to access it for their cost and billing purpose, they can see it and understand it. Okay, now let's click on review plus create. So it will validate all the things, all the properties we have which we have provided there. If something is wrong, it will throw an error. If everything is okay, it will validate as successful. Okay, now if you want to uh, automate this, you can always download a template for automation. So this will download an ARM template, and you can use that ARM template to create the database. You can even convert that ARM template to bicep, which I have already made a video about that, and create this resource from pipelines. Even if you want to integrate that with CI/CD pipeline, you can do that. Now let me click on create. So it will create a Azure Cosmos DB account. Okay, at this moment it is initializing and submitting the deployment. Once it's submitted, a deployment will be created with some name, and you can access it from there, like what is the status of my resource creation, and you can access it everything from there. So this deployment has been created and it is in progress. Okay, you can also view this deployment inside by going into this resource group and going into the deployments. You can check your inputs here, what are the inputs you have provided, and you can check the outputs here as well once this is complete. If you want to again see the template, like which template, what template I am using to deploy, you can always click on template, and you'll see the template here which is being created to deploy. This is an ARM template. You can see I'll make a video series on ARM templates as well, so you can watch that. If you don't know ARM templates, you can download it, you can deploy it as well. If you click on deploy, it will ask you all the things like where, which resource group, which subscription you want to deploy. Okay, and you can create the resource as well. Now let me see if my resource is created. Generally it takes some time to create. Let me refresh this. Okay, so this is still in progress. You can see the status is okay. That means we don't have issues, even the runtime issues. That's why status is okay, and it should be created soon in few minutes. Let me click on operation details, and you can see the details related with this. Operation name, provisioning operation, provisioning state, time, duration, and everything. If you want using this tracking ID, if you need more details, you can always go and uh, go in PowerShell and check with this tracking ID. Okay, status, type, resource ID, and resource name as well. Okay, so our resource deployment is complete. Let me open it. Click on go to resource. So this will take you to the Cosmos DB. Okay, so here is our Cosmos DB created. You can see all the properties here. You can open the data explorer as well from here, and if you want to enable the geo redundancy, you can always enable it from here. Okay, you can see monitoring related things here, and you can see all the containers as well. Okay, here in the list, but since we don't have any containers, it's not being seen here. You can always click on add container and click a containers. Okay, so it will connect you. See, it will connect you, and from here you can click create new containers, create new auto scale, container ID, indexing, all the things you can provide, unique key, and you can create the container. Okay, after that, if you expand this setting, you get all the things related to this the database, like replication and all. Since I have disabled it, it is available in west US region only. If you enable replication, it you can replicate it anywhere else as well. Okay, you can enable backup and restore. If you want to change networking, you can come here. You can always change it anytime. Okay, you can see keys to access this database. You can use these keys to connect to this database as well. Okay, if you want to attach some identity and give that identity some permission, you can do that as well. User assigned, system assigned. Okay, and you can see other things as well. If you want to integrate this database with Power BI or Azure function, you can integrate that with them here. You can see the containers as well. all the containers here. If you want to scale this database, you can scale that from here. Okay, you can see the settings here and other things. Okay, you can, or if you want to create the alerts, you can see monitoring related things like insights, metrics, logs. You can always see here. In the automation, you can export this template and use it for your automation. Okay, for new containers, you can go to containers and always click on new containers. Let me try to create one. So suppose I have created this, let it be the default. And see, so this should create a container. You can select the properties, like if you want to add unique key, you can add your unique key here, and if you want to enable or disable some other properties as well, you can always do that based on your requirement. Okay, container is still being created. So this is how we create Azure Cosmos DB in Azure, and this is how we can create containers. We can configure all the properties. So if you have to create Cosmos DB manually or either automated way, you can follow this process. You can create your database if you need to create manually, or if you need to automate it, you can always go and download the template and you can automate it. Okay, so partition key is wrong. That's why it is not creating. You can specify the correct partition key and you can always create the containers. Okay, that's it from this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe my channel. If you have some feedback, please let me know in the comment section. Thanks for watching my video. Have a nice day.